Welcome to the first installment of the Fireside Chat Series. We are so excited that you all are here. My name is Mary Magdalene Onyongo, and this event is being held by the American Bar Association Young Lawyers Division Women of Color Task Force. During each fireside chat, women of color in the legal profession will share stories that are personal and also valuable insight into their career paths, offering you advice about having a successful and fulfilling legal career. The American Bar Association Young Lawyers Division Women of Color Task Force seeks to examine the experiences of women of color in the legal profession, identify and effectively address the unique challenges that they face, and provide them with tools to build community. The task force pillars are as follows: eliminating barriers to entry of the legal profession, fostering a network of support, identifying and addressing challenges to retention, and promoting wellness and mindfulness. Today, I have the immense pleasure and honor to introduce our interviewer for today. Her name is Josephine Vanderhorst, and she is the managing attorney of the Child in Need of Care Unit at Southeast Louisiana Legal Services in New Orleans, Louisiana. She also currently serves as the American Bar Association Young Lawyers Division Wellness Task Force Chair. She received her JD from Tulane School of Law and her BA in Psychology from Tuskegee University. Please join me in welcoming Josephine Vanderhorst.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Mary Magdalene. I have the pleasure of introducing Dean Browne Lewis and interviewing her today. I think that this is going to be a wonderful conversation that we have, and I think she's going to have a lot of great advice to share with everybody today. So I will jump into her introduction. Dean Browne Lewis received her BA in Political Science from Grambling State University, her MA in Public Policy with a focus on economics and statistics from the Humphrey Institute at the University of Minnesota, her JD from the University of Minnesota School of Law, an LLM in Energy and Environmental Law from the University of Houston School of Law, and a professional certificate in Foundations of Artificial Intelligence from IBM. Dean Lewis has a wonderful biography. I'm sure some of you are familiar with her background. She is a prolific legal scholar. She researches in the areas of artificial intelligence, assisted reproductive technology, environmental racism, and inheritance law. Her scholarship has appeared in prominent law reviews. She is the author of 2 books, Papa's Baby, Paternity and Artificial Insemination, with the New York University Press, and the ethical and legal consequences of posthumous reproduction, arrogance, avarice, and anguish, with Routledge Publishing. Her most recent book on death and dying is forthcoming from Edward Elgar Publishing Company. She is one of the editors and a contributing author of Feminist Judgments, Rewritten Trust, and Estates Opinions. That's with Cambridge University Press. Dean Lewis is a member of the American Law Institute and serves on the board of the Center for Computer Assisted Legal Instruction, CALI. Some of you all may be familiar with that. She has received several prestigious national and international awards. She has been a visiting scholar at Yale University's Interdisciplinary Center for Bioethics and the Hastings Center. While a visiting researcher at the Brochure Foundation in Geneva, Switzerland, Dean Lewis conducted research on physician-assisted suicide. As a senior Fulbright specialist, she lectured and conducted research at Haifa University and Hebrew University in Israel. Dean Lewis was a core Fulbright scholar at King's College in the United Kingdom. After being one of only 6 law professors selected as a Robert Wood Johnson Public Health Law Scholar, she worked with the Cleveland Public Health Department to study the public health consequences of allowing minors to purchase small cigars. I hope everybody can join me in welcoming Dean Lewis. We will jump right into our chat. Dean Lewis, we have quite a few questions to ask and some answers to get. I know we're going to have a good conversation. So I will jump right in. Can you tell us about what led you to become a lawyer?
Thank you for that wonderful introduction and for inviting me here. I'm especially excited to be interviewed by Josephine because that was my mother's name. Um, I grew up in a small town in Louisiana, and like a lot of people who are going to law school because they want to make things better, I wanted to go to law school to make things better from an environmental perspective because I saw a lot of the contaminations of the bayous and things like that. And in my research, I realized that the persons who could set policies and make those changes were lawyers. So I was interested in biology and chemistry and the health portion of it, but I had a fear of blood, so I wasn't going to medical school. But instead, I knew I could go to law. I wanted to go to law school to make a difference in the world from that perspective.
And so I think you kind of already touched on our second question. So were you initially interested in environmental law or another area?
No, environmental law. I worked in Kisatchie National Forest as a youth conservationist, and I was interested in endangered species. I was interested in protecting trees and the environment, water law. And my favorite class in law school was property. So it sort of fit into my environmental law interests.
And how did you transition to artificial intelligence and the other areas and then academia?
Well, property's always been at the foundation of everything I've done, and property is so varied. So I started out doing environmental law, focusing on lead paint law, water law, and then I transitioned to doing some real estate law. Then I did family law with the property division of it, did probate law, which is estate planning. And one thing I always enjoyed was the law itself for the law. So I knew ultimately I wanted to be a law professor. So I started my career teaching legal writing for a couple of years, and I transitioned into a doctrinal position teaching property and estates and trusts. And I've also, when I was an undergraduate, in addition to studying political science at Grambling, I had an opportunity to study computer science at Carnegie Mellon. So I've always been fascinated by robotics and other forms of technology. And that also has a property tie-in because the intellectual property component of it. So that's how I started writing in those areas. And eventually I got in because I was still also interested in health. So I got into bioethics and doing that. And that's how I started doing assisted reproductive technology, physician-assisted suicide, and those issues. And a lot of things that I ended up doing as an academic came from when I met other academics. So I got to, listening to the news or reading something and was outraged, saying that there should be something done, there should be policies put in place. And one key thing academics can do is create the world that you want to exist and write the articles, and hopefully they have some impact on the law.
That's amazing. That is a great segue into everything else that we are going to be talking about today. I think a lot of young attorneys are kind of at the point that they're considering changing up what they thought they were interested in when they started law school, and kind of how would they go about that. So I think we'll have some of those questions at the end that were submitted with registration. We'll probably hit on that. Out of everything that you've learned, what is the most important lesson that you wish you'd learned sooner, or just that you find serves you the most throughout your practice?
The thing I wish I'd learned sooner is the work-life balance, kind of, because I'm a worker type A personality, worker B. I'm wired that way. And so you think that that it won't get done if you're not there. And so people realize that you would do it. So everything keeps getting on you. And then you feel guilty if you don't do it. But then you forget to take care of yourself and know that if you're not there to do it because of health issues or because you die, it will still get done. So I wish I've learned earlier how to prioritize and how to do things that I wanted to do. Because I've done a lot of things because they needed to get done, not necessarily that was a part of my job or something that I wanted to do. So I've learned to be really, really valuable, really, really selfish with my time. And that goes against the grain of who I am because I grew up one of 12 kids. I'm number 9, but I'm used to doing for younger kids. I'm used to doing for, helping my parents out. So I think that the key lesson is, learn to take care of yourself first. That's what I wish I had known earlier.
I love that. I need to hear that. I think that was specifically for me to hear. I'm sure there are other people that are on here, but I definitely needed to hear that. What advice do you have for a future young lawyer? This is a 3-part question, so I'm going to ask it in each part.
A future young lawyer, I'm assuming you're talking about somebody who's currently in law school.
Yes, ma'am.
My advice is choose your own path and not the path that somebody chooses for you. Like, don't go in this area of law because they say this is hot. This is where you can make the most money. This is what it means to be a lawyer. I think you have to treat law almost like your undergraduate situation. Choose a major early. Like, during the first year, you're going to be exposed to so many different things. And I think that the earlier you can, in the beginning of your second year, identify, number one, where you want to live, because it's critically important how you network and where you want to live. Secondly, what area of law you want to practice. And once you decide that, then you can't be locked in law school. You have to go out and network into the community. Join the ABA section on what that is. A lot of organizations in different areas, they have student portions of it. Join that, join your local bar association, start making connections because that goes a long ways. Start getting yourself exposure, like out at these moot court competitions that are here throughout the country that are judged by, actual practicing attorneys, and make your mark. So you can't, because the way legal education is now in the practice of law is you can't say, okay, I'm going to be on law review. My GPA is going to be really, really high, and that's going to get me into the door. That isn't the case anymore. It's about networking and putting your name out there and almost like creating for yourself a marketing plan, how you mark you, and don't be afraid to toot your own horn.
I love that. The next question is, what advice do you have for a current young lawyer?
I think for someone who's currently practicing law, I think you need to take a pause and see if you're being fulfilled by what you're doing, if you enjoy what you're doing, and do that early enough because you already have the student loan debt probably. So before you start living a certain lifestyle, like, the big fancy car or the mortgage where you can't get out of what you're currently doing, don't get yourself in a situation like that until you decide that you are doing what you want to be doing. Is it fulfilling you? And it's okay to say, this is not what I want to do. Let me move on to something else, even if it's not something traditionally law related, even if it's just JD Advantage, because the law trickles through just every aspect of society. And so that's the critical thing, is to do a self-evaluation, a lot of self-reflecting, do your vision board every year, and do what you want to do, because at the end of the day, anytime you attend a funeral, you never see a hearse putting back a bunch of things, right? They're not going to bring your house with you, not going to bring your jewelry, your purses, whatever. Ultimately, you have one life, and your career is just a part of your life, but ultimately it should not be your life. So evaluate, if you're not happy where you are, figure out a way to make yourself happy, even if it means leaving.
That is great advice. My group of lawyer friends and I, we check in every year and we ask questions. Are we happy? Are we looking at career changes? What are we interested in? And we did that from advice of our elder attorneys when we went to a conference, and we were all there, and they kind of suggested that that's what they did. They formed groups and checked in with each other. You hinted at how you transitioned, but what advice do you have for a young lawyer who is considering changing practice areas? And then I'm going to add in also, what advice do you have for a young lawyer who's considering changing geographical areas?
Okay, practice areas. First, I think look at and make a list of your transferable skills, the part of your job that you like. If you don't like litigation, take that off the table, right? But if you like certain aspects of transaction, if you like compliance or what you like, so that's going to be a component of your job. And I tell because I mentor some young lawyers in a group that I'm in, and what I tell them is, use the internet, find somebody who has your job, right? They have the job that you really want. I want that job. Reach out to them. People love their egos to be boasted, right? And say, how did you get where you are? And can you help me get there? Most people are really, really generous with their time, and they're willing to help. And it's sort of like an informal mentorship. Another thing is, depending on the area, you may need more education. You may need to do an LLM. Say, for example, if you're interested in tax law and you just have a basic law degree, you may get an LLM in tax law. But another thing that is popping up a lot of certifications, and they have certifications that are independent of law school. So, example, data privacy, technology, healthcare. So just go and read, and you get more education because that will make you stand out. But now that you have this area of practice behind you, anybody that's hiring you know that you have those skills. You just need the content for the particular subject matter that you're interested in. With regards to changing geographic location, look to your law school alumni and see if they're in that area, right? If you want to move to Texas, does your law school have alumni in Texas? Reach out, have information and conversation. I'm interested by relocating. What advice would you give me? You got to, if you want to practice law, figure out what the waiving requirements are. Can you port your law degree? Because some jurisdictions make it pretty easy to waive. Other jurisdictions make it almost impossible if that you can't waive into it. So that's critically, what do you need to transfer from licensing? But another avenue, if you don't want to worry about taking another bar exam or waiving into, is look for like a federal government position, corporations, law firms where you would be just doing federal practices. So your law degree would be, your law license would be portable. But more than anything, have a reason why you're going there. Just don't wake up and say, you know what, I think Alaska would be nice, and move to Alaska. Because then once you get there and you've relocated your whole life, you might find that that's not a place you want to be. Spend some time in the place, take a vacation there, stay a couple of weeks to make sure that you can find a community there for you. Because remember, it's not just about work. Can you find some place to get your hair done there? Can you find a good church there? Can you find a good social environment there? So I think that you have to investigate those situations before you even think about relocating geographically.
I love that. I completely agree. Explore and make sure that there are things that you need there before you just decide to uproot. I've had quite a few friends who have just decided to uproot, and they get there and they are miserable. So that was a good piece, a very good piece. As a dean of an HBCU law school, what successes do you believe you and your students experience that are unique to the HBCU experience?
Well, one success I think we've done is figured out how for different people from different walks of life to interact and live together as a community. And that's really important in this time when our country is so divided along so many lines. I like to say that we are not a melting pot, we are a salad where everybody has a different component and bring a different life, lived experience. So we try to make sure we create an inclusive environment. And I think that that's critically important. And it's because we were created to foster segregation because they didn't want African Americans to have to go to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So we're mindful of that. And so we value inclusive and diversity. So we work really, really hard at that. And we've been successful in that. Another thing we've been successful in is really interacting with the community and having true social justice initiatives. After what is happening in the country and the racial reckoning, a lot of law schools threw up anti-racist curriculum, social justice institutes, and different things. And that's what we've done for 81 plus years. We've educated people who want to go out into the world and make some type of change out of necessity, because we realize that we have a responsibility to the persons who bled and died so we could exist. There were originally about 22 HBCU law schools, and now there are only 6 accredited HBCU law schools. And so the deans of those law schools meet regularly to discuss the challenges and the successes, because we want to learn from history so history would not repeat itself, as to why we went down from 22 law schools to 6 HBCU law schools.
That's amazing. That's actually the reason that I attended an HBCU. I wanted to get that input. I grew up in California. Everything's very much so diverse, and they, celebrate all holidays. And so I wanted to get the input of the things that I felt were being left out, that were taught to us. And that was a tremendous part of my education and the way that I work. I think you started to hint on it, but what challenges do you see between yourself professionally and the students at a HBCU?
I think a big challenge is the perception that diversity is our responsibility as an HBCU law school. So whenever there's a program where they're giving out money or resources to create diversity initiatives, they would give them to the PWIs because they feel that they need some type of incentive to help with diversity. And we educate about 31% of the Black and Hispanic lawyers in the country out of the 6 HBCU law schools, but we do that with our own resources. And so that's a big challenge because our resources are limited. Because even diversity pipeline programs and things at PWIs, those students ultimately end up at our law school. So we get the students with their unique challenges, whereas PWIs have gotten the resources. So I think financial resources is a critical challenge. And another challenge is imposter syndrome, is trying to convince us that we should not exist, that we're not good enough, and preventing our students from internalizing that. Because, when you look at the U.S. World News Report rankings, Howard is the only ranked HBCU law school. And it doesn't mean that the other HBCU law schools are not good law schools. We put our good students, our students pass the bar exam, they do well. And so it's making sure that students understand that we are going to get you where you need to do to be successful to practice law, and don't let anybody ever define you and think that you're getting less of an education because you're at an HBCU law school.
I would agree with that. Coming out and practicing versus being the person that applied. At the end of the day, the law school that we went to doesn't come up when we're in the courtroom. It's just your legal skills. Do you have the ability to do what you need to do to get your point across in your case? Can you win? And so it shouldn't be the thought of, I have to go to this law school and not this law school because that one's a HBCU. And so I would agree with that challenge as a whole. And I see it a lot in the younger law students that come to our courtrooms or come to clerk with us. It's imposter syndrome is a big piece of everything that goes on. What has been the biggest challenge in your career, and how, if at all, have you overcome it?
I think the biggest challenge for me is that I'm not very good at playing politics, in the sense of, if I sit in a room and there's a microaggression or there's something that's going on where diversity is being talked about, but the programs that they're talking about are not truly getting at diversity. Are they getting at diversity without discussing race? Because we know that we've been talking about diversity and inclusion in this country for 30 plus years, and we're still at a situation where we can't even have a frank discussion about race, because instead of saying systemic racism, we keep talking about systemic inequality. And so I think being an advocate and being vocal, sometimes I can have maybe a little bit more finesse, but that's just not my personality. And so that's been a challenge, dealing with people who don't understand, and dealing with other Black women who say, well, you can't come across as a strong Black woman because you don't want to have to worry about the angry Black woman stereotype. I don't care about the angry Black woman stereotype. I have a right to be angry. I'm not angry all the time. And when I am angry, it's justified. And society gives me enough reason to be angry. And how I've overcome that challenge is just committed to myself to be the best version of me I can be. And if people like that, that's fine. And so I probably missed out on some things because I didn't play the politics, I didn't play nice, but that's perfectly fine to me, because I don't want to get in a situation where I'm being rewarded for being who I'm not. So how I've overcome that is just accept the fact that I'm enough. I am who I am. And I'm always going to be in the room advocating for other Black and brown people, even if that means that I lose something on the back end for me personally.
That's amazing. What accomplishment are you most proud of, and why?
I think I'm more proud of the number. I've worked at 6 PWIs, and I think I was more proud of getting those PWIs to seriously put in interventions and programs to help increase the diversity at law schools and in practice of law. Because we have to figure out a way to move the needle. It's stuck at 5% of African Americans, and I think about 4% of Latinos. We have to figure out how to move the needle. And so anything I do that can do that, that's what I'm most proud of. Because people before me benefited me. Because when I started at the University of Minnesota, well, my first year class had 255 students. Of those 255, 250 were white. There was 1 Latino, 1 Native American, and 3 African Americans. And it was an isolating place. And so I've always in my career say, I want to make sure that no student of color feels that they don't belong where they are, and they feel isolated. So I'm proud of, my proudest moments are when I can support my students of color and their successes. I think I'm on Facebook with a lot of them just to see how well they're doing, how they're punching above their weight, how they're overcoming what people say they could not do. I think those are my proudest moments.
That's amazing. I'm going to jump back to the HBCU law school and ask, what's one big misconception about your institution on a broad scale, HBCU law schools in general, and then just regular law schools in general?
I do my school with the other HBCU law schools because we talk about this quite frequently, the deans and I. And it's the misconception that historically Black colleges mean only Black people can come. That's number one. And secondly, is that the only HBCU law school in the country is Howard.
Mhm.
So those are the biggest misconceptions we have to overcome. And we are pretty diverse. We have a lot of Native Americans, Latinos, African Americans, white, first generation students, students with disabilities. So I think that's the biggest misconception, that because it's a historically Black college, is for Blacks only. Um, I think the misconceptions about law school in general is that most law schools teach you how to practice law, and they don't.
Not at all.
Not at all. They're doing better now that the ABA is requiring more practical skills, but I remember being at the University of Minnesota, they only taught us how to pass the bar exam, where there was a school called William Mitchell, where they taught them how to practice law. So we would go to court with them after I got out of law school, in my first time going to court and having a William Mitchell person on the other side. And they wiped the floor with me because they knew how to practice law. And that's what they had focused upon. The bar passage rate was lower than the University of Minnesota, but when it came down to practicing law. So I tell students, clinics are important, externships are important. Don't rely upon, because I didn't do any clinics or externships in law school, because I relied upon them to teach me how to practice law, which was a big mistake. So that's a big misconception. Law schools are only there to teach you how to pass the bar exam for the most part, not how to practice law.
I would agree with that completely. That is the one piece of advice that I had before going into law school. And I focused very heavily on clerking, interning, any free minute that I had that I wasn't in the books. I was at an office learning something. And that was the purpose. And thankfully, I learned that through Clio, and participating in that helped me in law school a lot. What do you believe is the biggest challenge facing women of color attorneys today, and how can we overcome it?
I think the biggest challenge is still having people recognize your expertise and that you belong and that you're not the secretary. I other defendant. I remember going to court so many times with my suit and being mistaken for the defendant, saying they're waiting on the attorney to show up. So, and I think that still happens in a lot of respects. I have a group with the other Black women deans and the other deans of color, because we have Black, Native American, Latinos. We always talk about the same thing, not being taken seriously. When you're on a committee with persons of equal rank, but they're male, they figure you're supposed to take the notes. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the biggest challenge is still trying to survive in a man's world. And I often tell people that, we hear a lot about the glass ceiling. And I don't think women of color have a glass ceiling. I think it's a concrete ceiling, because a glass ceiling indicates that you can look up and see a possibility. And for a lot of us, we have to drill on through it. And so I think that's the biggest challenge, is proving to people that you belong, and proving and demanding the respect that you've earned.
I would agree with that. I work with social workers, and every time I go to a new court, they assume that I'm the social worker, and I have to say, no, I'm actually the attorney, and I'm the boss of this attorney that I'm here shadowing. So, and they are very taken aback. The bailiffs are taken aback. The judges are taken aback, and everybody's kind of shocked that this young woman of color is leading a unit. But even when I was a brand new attorney, they would not believe, they would demand my bar card every time. And I know you're familiar because you're from Louisiana, so you know.
Yes, I do. I do.
Very daunting experience being brand new, straight out of law school, and not being in rural areas before, but going out there has humbled me a lot. Very much so. What has kept you grounded throughout your career? I think we talked about this a little bit earlier.
Well, two things, my family and my faith. am a Christian, and that's critically important to me because it said I have barriers that I won't cross, and I can sleep well at night. And so I put that in any decision that I make. My family keeps me really grounded, because when I go home, I'm to Louisiana, I'm still making the gumbo, right? So nobody's serving it to me. So I think that's critically important. And I think that don't get too caught up in who you are or what you are, because being an attorney is so ingrained in you. If you become an attorney, it's what you are. But I think you have to step back and know that everything you do should be from the perspective of your faith or whatever you believe in. And so that's what has really kept me grounded.
And you spoke a little bit earlier about establishing boundaries and kind of putting yourself first. What other advice would you give a young attorney who's experiencing burnout in their career?
I would say make sure that at least once a day you take 15 to 30 minutes to yourself where you don't think about work, you don't think about anybody else, you just be selfish. Even if you're taking a walk or whatever it is, but it's all about your physical and mental health. And then I would also say that when it comes to vacation, be a European, because when I lived in London, they took, they're going to take their vacation days. They're going to take their holidays. Americans tend not to, because we feel we're missing something if we go on vacation. Learn to take at least one day a month where you do absolutely nothing. Don't get out of bed, binge watch Netflix or whatever, to clear your mind of the cobwebs. And make sure that you take every season, make sure that you have, even if it's just a long weekend, a vacation to refresh yourself. And be able to identify the signs of burnout and the causes of burnout. Are you burned out because you may be burnt out because you just don't like what you're doing. Mm-hmm. When I first started, I had a job. Every morning I got up, I would dread this in my pit of my stomach going to work. And so I was burned out in the sense that I didn't like what I was doing. Even if you enjoy what you're doing, are you doing your work and somebody else's? And one thing I love about the young attorneys, though, in this generation, is that they have mastered saying no a lot better than my generation. And so they're not going to work 90 hours a week. They're not going to, they're taking, we talked about work-life balance in my generation, but I think your generation is really taking it seriously. And I really commend, and I'm learning a lot from your generation, incorporating into my own life, is knowing how to balance and get a hobby. I make sure that I paint every Saturday, and it's a conscious effort to do something for myself once a week. And I find if I don't, like I relocate, I haven't set up my studio yet. And I find if I'm not painting, then I'm working, because that's just like my go-to. Mm-hmm. So find something you enjoy doing, playing golf, playing tennis, whatever it is. And have an accountability person in the sense that, you may not know you're burned out because you may think that this is just regular life, but have somebody who can say, you need to stop, let's go to a movie or whatever. You need to get a life. And I think it's difficult to burn out if you have a balanced life. So if you're facing burnout, then you need to do a step back, because what happens is you're letting work take over your life, and work should never be your life, because work is just work.
I agree with all of that. I am the Wellness Task Force Chair for the ABA-YLD. And these are all things that we have conversations about when we meet. These are things that my friends and I discuss. I also add in, and I think that it's critical in the part that you said with our generation and the younger lawyers, we have more boundaries. We say no more. And I think that we have that divide because a lot of us that I talk to, and they have that real strict boundary, we have a lot of people who aren't lawyers as our gatekeeper to tell us when we are burnt out and to pull us away from work and say, wait, you're doing the lawyer thing again. Can you stop, unplug, and come have fun? And so I think that that's a big piece of the difference. When I talk to some of the lawyers who have mentored me or who I've just become friends with, they say, you know, when I was young, all of my friends were lawyers. And so what we did was normal and nobody called us out on it. But you guys hang out with other people and you're doing different things. So you're able to be called out differently. But other than that, I think that everything you said is amazing. I hope everybody took notes on that because burnout is real and you will not know you're going through it until somebody else points it out. Or until you're listening to something and somebody describes something that you did, and then you're like, oh, that wasn't stress, that's burnout.
And I will say that I didn't think about it until you said it. All my friends are lawyers, and all my friends now are lawyers, and all my friends are lawyers are deans, and so we talk about it regularly. And so I'm going to go out and get me some non-lawyer friends.
It'll help on the self-care aspect a lot.
Okay.
Because they will call you out. They will tell me if my phone rings, they will take my phone away and say, no, we're not working today. That's not happening. Unplug. They are some of my best accountability partners.
I would do that.
So I think we sort of got here already, but what do you find is the value of mentorship and how can mentorship help young lawyers succeed in their careers?
I think mentorship has several values. Number one is helping you navigate the politics and everything to get where you want to be, helping you create a pathway to where ultimately you would like to be in your career. I think from a psychological perspective, if you have a good mentor, I've had good mentors in the past, and they can tell you how to step back from things and how to evaluate things. And a mentor should be a person to model yourself after. It should be a person who's doing what you want to do. Sometimes they've been where you've been and they've seen the outer pitfalls, and they can tell you that and can help you navigate away from that. So that's the value of mentorship. And I think the second part of your question was how to get mentors.
How can a mentor help a young lawyer succeed in their career?
So you have a mentor. So there's several types of mentors. There's these formal programs that you have at law schools, but law firms, employers should also have mentors, but you may want to pick out your own, somebody who has your values and more in tune to what your personality is. Because it's sort of like a work friend, right? And so the way that person can excel is that person can look out for you, because especially if you're young and just starting out, like when I was a young law professor, pre-tenure, there was some things I couldn't say or shouldn't do. I mean, I said them anyway, but probably some things I shouldn't have said. But you can go to your mentor and express those concerns, and those people are senior enough, they can take back and make sure your point of view goes forward without you losing any of your political capital that you may later use. So it's almost like somebody who can negotiate and navigate on your behalf with regards to raises and promotions, just about anything. So make sure that you get a mentor that you can trust. And you can tell if somebody is real chatty and gossipy, don't trust them. And you guys are too young to remember Monica Lewinsky and Linda Tripp. That's a prime example of you don't want a mentor that you can't trust, right? You can't tell, and don't tell the mentor all your business. Save that for your personal friends. Your mentor is your work friends. And sometimes people cross the line because somebody's nice to you and trying to help you navigate your work. You bring them into your personal, and never do that. But a mentor, a good mentor, can help you excel by looking out for you. helping you get the tools you need to succeed, and also to going through helping you navigate the pitfalls that work against you being able to succeed.
Great. And you mentioned a little bit about programs that may offer mentors, but how else would you suggest a young lawyer or a law student go about finding a mentor? I know you talked about, finding somebody who does what you want to do.
Well, I think another thing is to talk to other people, because there's some people who at the end of their career, they may be getting ready to leave, but they may have somebody who they've been mentoring. And so talk to that person about their mentee and see if they think that mentee could be a good mentor to you. So it's all about, passing the torch. So that's one way to do it. Another way is just to go out to lunch with your coworkers, especially the senior ones, and start trying to, it's just like you make new friends, right? How you evaluate in your mind who you can and cannot get along with. Is your personality compatible with that? So do a lot of investigation, because I think when you assign a mentor on a lot of these formal programs, it's not based on your personality, right? It's not, they haven't done the eHarmony kind of test where, are you going to be compatible with the person? They've just said, okay, you want to practice this area, that person's practicing this area. But, they don't take in consideration that you're an introvert, this person an extrovert. And, some people can drive you crazy. It depends on the personality. So I think that don't be quick to get a mentor. And I think informal mentorship is better than the formalized program, because then there's no burden or responsibility or obligation on anybody. So somebody's mentoring you because they want to, not because they think they have to check off a box to say, I mentored somebody.
I love it. How do you define success? And has your definition of success changed over time?
It has definitely changed over time. Initially, I defined success I would set goals for myself career-wise, do the 5-year plan. And if I was meeting those benchmarks, that was success. But I think success for me, how I'm defining it now is, even if the 5-year plan, my ability to pivot, if what is the trajectory of the career isn't necessary, like if I get to step 3 and I'm saying, I'm not feeling 4 or 5. Before I was really regimented, it's like, oh, that's success. But success is knowing when to not continue, I think is more impactful and more successful. But ultimately, I think success is happiness and fulfillment. How do you do that and be able to make a living in the profession that you love, and to make sure that everything is balanced, that you're spending just as much attention to your work side as you do your personal side. And defining, and I think that the definition of success moves, and it should move weekly. It depends upon some, as a dean, I started my deanship in the midst of the coronavirus. And in the early days, success was just like getting out of bed. I made it into the office today, without anybody yelling at me. So I think success means that on a daily basis, set small benchmarks. And I think have in the back of your mind some place you would like to go, but don't be so rigid about the 5-year plan. And you got to stick to this plan, and you got to have this by this age and that by this age. I think that that's a lot that my generation did. There was really a bunch of foolishness. I think that define success for yourself. Are you happy? Are you at peace? Are you enjoying what you're doing day by day? I think then if you are, you're successful, even if you are, regardless of what you're doing. If you are cleaning the building, and at the end of the day, you're like, I love cleaning the building, I get peace clean, you've been successful.
I would agree with that completely. I tell my unit all the time, did you make it today? Did you do one thing on your to-do list? That means you had a good day. Has nothing to do about, did you check off the entire list? Did you do one thing on that list? That's good. What advice would you give to young attorneys striving for their own definition of success?
I think a lot of self-reflection. There are a lot of, like once a year I do the vision board, but there are a lot of those type of things out there where you can, and be honest with yourself, and write what you need to do versus what you want to do. You need to pay your student loans. You need to pay your mortgage. You want to go to Hawaii. And I say, balance it out. Do as much of what you want to do as what you need to do, and figure out how to do it. And I think that how you get to your definition of success is there are two things. There's the work and there's the personal. I say the work is, would you do this job for free? If you have a job you love that you do for free, that's your version of success. Another version of success is, are you courageous enough to leave a job that you hate, even if it means you got to downsize your life and you got to give up, going on vacation 5 times a year? So are you courageous enough to do that? And I think that if you do an evaluation of your life, the pros and cons of every decision in your life, whatever's in the middle is success. Because to me, success is balance. It's balancing everything. Because we know it's not money. Because, what's the name? The Spade woman who committed suicide with a lot of money. We know it's not fortune and fame, right? And so, but at the end of the day, I think it's mental and physical wellness and wholeness and being happy. And I always remember that success means nothing if you are not physically and mentally healthy. So you have to take care of yourself. That's the key thing. Get enough rest, eat right, and exercise. And be kind to yourself and be kind to other people.
I love that. This has been an amazing conversation. I have learned a lot. I loved interviewing you. And I am very thankful that the ABA put this together so that other people can learn from what you have to share. And
this has been wonderful. I've learned a lot from you. Get me some non-lawyer friends. So thanks for doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who joined us today. And thank you so much, Dean Lewis and Josephine, for your insights. They were absolutely incredible. They spoke to me personally. I'm sure they spoke to a lot of our attendees as well. Our next Fireside Chat will be held on January 21st, and we look forward to seeing many of our attendees there. And thank you again so much for coming, and we hope you all have a wonderful afternoon and a great weekend.